Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to come from the fourth chapter in the book of Jeremiah. And throughout the book of Jeremiah, we read of the unpleasant but necessary topic of judgment. There comes a time when Yahweh can stand sin and wickedness no more, and judgment must come. And this is commensurate with his completely just nature. Now, testament to that just nature, he never issues judgment all of a sudden or inexplicably. There's always ample warnings to them, and that was very much the function of the prophet, to enforce the covenant according to the violation of which the judgment had to come. And it came not long after Jeremiah's prophesied. He lived through the decline and collapse of Judah. So the opening verse reads, "If you do return, O Israel, declares Yahweh, return to me, and if you remove your abominations from my presence, and cease straying, and shall swear, as Yahweh lives, in truth, in justice, and in righteousness, then nations shall bless themselves in him, and they shall boast in him." So the practice which was endemic throughout Judah's history was not so much unmitigated idolatry, but what is known as syncretism, which combines the worship of Yahweh with erroneous deities of the adjacent civilizations. And to compromise the worship of Yahweh, the first commandment is exclusive concentration of worship. He is to be the only object of our adoration and affection. Is tantamount to rebellion. So that's what he means by abomination, and they were causing them to stray, to depart from the covenant path, the straight and narrow. But he promises them that the Abrahamic blessing, which he promised to him, that all nations would be blessed in them, and they would be caused to have a claim in the other nations if they would only worship him in truth, in spirit, in justice, and in righteousness. "For this is what Yahweh said to the men of Judah and Jerusalem: Break up your tillable ground, and do not sow among thorns." The agricultural analogy is prolific throughout scriptures, because we must remember that the Israelites, the Jews, were an agricultural people. So the analogy is that from certain soils will yield more abundant crops, and there are thorns in this patch of the Judaic spiritual life, which had to be tilled and had to be removed in order for anything to grow and flourish spiritually. "Circumcise yourselves unto Yahweh, and take away the foreskins of your heart, you men of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem, lest my wrath come forth like fire, and burn with none to quench it, because of the evil of your deeds." So circumcision was the identifying mark of the Jews. It was issued to Abraham in the 17th chapter of Genesis, and the problem is that many Jews were content to settle on that and exaggerated the salvific significance, and many Christians have the same erroneous extreme of emphasis in baptism of the salvific significance of it. But we are not saved by absorbing religious rituals, because it's all meaningless if our hearts are rotten or not aligned with Yahweh, and the consequences are frankly foretold. Wrath shall come like fire and burn with none to quench it. That means there's nothing you can do to put it out. It's going to come and consume, and there's nothing we can do about it. And it's because of the evil of our deeds. So the issue of judgment, the issuing and execution of judgment, are never without cause or reason. "Declare in Judah, and let it be heard in Jerusalem, and say, Blow the ram's horn in the land. Cry aloud and say, Gather yourselves, and let us go into the walled city. Lift up the banner toward Zion. Be strong, do not stand still, for I am bringing evil from the north and great destruction." The evil from the north was the nation, the rising imperial nation of Babylon, which was located about 500, the central city of Babylon was located about 500 miles northeast of Judah, but the Chaldeans were the people who they were the ethnicity of the empire, which was centered in Babylon. And they were the instruments of the Almighty to bring their reprobate covenant violators closer to him. And during the exile, even though he seemingly abandoned them, or at least forsook their worldly empire, he did not abandon them, and they in fact grew closer and purged much of their idolatrous inclinations from them. A lion has come up from his bush, and the destroyer of nations is on his way. He has departed from his place to make your land a ruin. Your cities are laid waste, without inhabitant. So he has advanced knowledge of the phenomenon before its occurrence. So the preparations are already in order, and it's only a matter of time before irrevocable destruction, and he's going to convert their city to an essential equivalent of a ghost town, what we refer to as a ghost town. And the irony, of course, is that Babylon itself, once the center of worldly wealth and power and prestige, was a ghost town, so much so that by the year 117 AD, when the Roman Emperor Trajan, under whom Rome witnessed its greatest territorial expansion, ventured into the Parthian, which was the Persian Empire. Parthian was the dynasty, and the city of Babylon, he discovered it to be an uninhabited ghost town. For this, gird yourself with sackcloth, lament and wail, for the burning displeasure of Yahweh has not turned back from us. So the appropriate response is sadness and lamenting and wailing. These are emotional expressions of sadness, and the burning displeasure of Yahweh will not cease until it accomplishes its purpose, and there is no escaping or turning back from it. They had violated the covenant repeatedly and consistently, and so much so that there was nothing they could do at this point to redeem themselves from their destruction. And in that day it shall be, declares Yahweh, that the heart of the king shall perish, and the heart of the heads, and the priest shall be astonished, and the prophets wonder. So this is an unanticipated mystery of mysterious dimensions, and it's going to cause the king, the priest, and the prophet to be amazed at its occurrence and perplexed at its unfolding. Then I said, Ah, Master Yahweh, truly you have greatly deceived this people in Jerusalem, saying peace is for you, whereas the sword reaches to its heart. So it's not in Yahweh's nature to deceive. He is not a man that he would lie, and he's incapable of uttering untruth, but these were the message of the false prophets who had it was a more commercially lucrative commodity to, much as the prosperity gospel in our own day and age is to preach that Judah would not be succumb to destruction. These were the message of the false prophets who were very much contending against Jeremiah. At that time it shall be said to this people, and to Jerusalem, a scorching wind of the bare heights blows in the wilderness towards the daughter of my people, not to fan or to cleanse. So this scorching wind is not for refining, but destroying. There's a difference. Now, the refining process is ultimately analogous to a burning, whereby metals are refined through a burning process, and that the spiritual translation is that we must undergo trials to better and improve ourselves, but the scorching wind, the calamitous force, is identified as a destructive and not a remedial force. A wind too strong for this shall come for me. Now it is I who speak judgments against them. So the judgment and the destruction which was coming to them was authored and orchestrated by Yahweh, and not without good cause. They had repeatedly and consistently violated the covenant, and there's limits to his mercy. See, he comes up like a cloud, and his chariots like a whirlwind. His horses shall be swifter than eagles. Woe to us, for we are ravaged. So the items, the instruments and the items of the Almighty are the Babylon military insignia, which are swifter than eagles, and there's nothing to look forward to because they will be ravaged or destroyed. O Jerusalem, wash your hearts from evil and be saved. Till when would your wicked thoughts remain with you? So the Yahweh discerns the thoughts. He's omniscient. He has mind-reading capabilities. There's nothing we can hide from him because he sees all and knows all. So even the evil subterranean motives of our heart are manifest to him, and we cannot fool him. So he's imploring the Judean citizens and us vicariously via proxy to cleanse our hearts from evil. And the heart is identified as desperately wicked and incomprehensible in Jeremiah 17:9. For a voice is declaring from Dan, and is proclaiming trouble from Mount Ephraim. Dan was at the northern extremity of the nation of Israel, so that was the nation from the north. Babylon would have entered from Dan and Mount Ephraim. Ephraim was one of the tribes of the northern kingdom, so named after one of the sons of Joseph, and they were so prominent amongst the northern kingdom of Israel that the kingdom was also known as Ephraim and referred to such as throughout scriptures. Announce to the nations, look, proclaim against Jerusalem, that besiegers are coming from a distant land, and raise their voice against the cities of Judah. Like a keepers of a field, they are against her all around, because she has rebelled against me, declares Yahweh. So this evil, sunken, idolatrous, heathen nation was very much sent for the purpose at the behest of Yahweh, even though they had no way of knowing it, to punish his wayward people who had violated their terms of the covenant. Your ways and your deeds have brought this upon you. This is your evil, because it is bitter, because it has reached into your heart. So as I'm going to reiterate once more that the judgment was not without reasonable cause or warning. So they their waywardness had brought this upon them. They had no one to blame but themselves. He had repeatedly admonished them through his prophets throughout the age, and they had succumbed to idolatry and all sorts of wickedness, which represented a violation of the covenant. And the evil is bitter. It is not sweet. It's nothing to look forward to. It's nothing pleasant, but it is necessary. And it is because it has reached into your heart. So their heart is the reflection of the man, and their hearts were lacking merit, according to the moral measurement of Yahweh. O my inward parts, I am in pain. O the walls of my heart pounds in me. I am not silent, for you have heard, O my being, the sound of the ram's horn, a shout of battle. So Jeremiah is frequently referred to as the weeping prophet. Now, in public, he was bold, and he was a very bold preacher, but in private, he is prone to lamentations and weeping, and the cause of his lamentation is the decline and collapse and deterioration of his beloved nation of Judah. And so he has reasonable cause to be sad, and he uses frank language. My heart pounds in me. I am not silent. This is not silence. He did not suffer his sadness in silence, but made it known, even though he was in private. Destruction upon destruction is cried, for all the land is ravaged. Suddenly my tents are ravaged, my curtains in a moment. So this is an accelerated activity of destruction. It is compared to happening in a moment, so much so that one barely has time to analyze and assess why it is coming, or to react or respond defensively. How long shall I see a banner and hear the sound of the ram's horn? For my people are foolish. They have not known me. They are stupid children, and they have no understanding. They are wise to do evil, but to do good they have no knowledge. So these are unflattering terms used by Yahweh to describe his chosen people, and this is addressed to them collectively. Now, granted, there were some righteous examples and worthy models for us to emulate, namely Jeremiah, but the nation to whom he preached was collectively deemed as foolish, stupid, and they knew plenty about how to sin, but they had no knowledge of the ways of Elohim or righteousness. So their minds were oriented through accumulation of habits to wickedness, and they were called to righteousness, and this they failed to fulfill. I looked at the earth and saw it was formless and empty. In the heavens they had no light. This brings us back to Genesis 1:2, whereby the spirit of Elohim brings order out of chaos. And in the third verse of the same chapter, he declares, "Let there be light." He spoke light into existence. So this takes us back to the primordial founding of the earth. This is before Judah was even an idea, at least in themselves. because the maker of heaven and earth knows the unfolding of history from the beginning to the end. But this also touches on the overlap and interplay of redemptive and creative history. Creation was in its pristine form declared good in Genesis 1:31, and the labors of the fall and the sin-induced disequilibrium in the natural order requires redemption, which is Elohim's post-creative activity and ministry. I looked at the mountains and saw they shook, and all the hills were swaying. I looked and saw there was no man, and all the birds of the heavens had fled. I looked and saw the garden land was a wilderness, and all its cities were broken down at the presence of Yahweh by his burning displeasure. So no item or building or person or any created creature or anything that we can create can withstand him in the midst of his wrath. It is an irresistible force and an unstoppable object. So whether it's mountains, gardens, or any other item in the created order, none of them are powerful enough to withstand before his burning displeasure. For thus said Yahweh, all the earth shall be a ruin, but I shall not make a complete end. This is an implicit reference to the remnant, the righteous remnant of, now in every age there is, even though society at large and the world at large succumbs to wickedness, there is always a remnant or a minority of the righteous people, and for these the earth shall be a ruin, but he will spare and be mindful and judge accordingly the righteous remnant in proportion to their moral merits. On account of this, let the earth mourn and the heavens above be dark, because I have spoken, because I have purposed and shall not relent, nor do I turn back from it. So Yahweh's already made up his mind. There is nothing we can do to persuade him otherwise on the path he has already foreordained, and that path is destruction of the covenant violators, and the earth will mourn and the heavens will be dark at this momentous occasion. All the city is fleeing from the noise of the horsemen and bow archers. They shall go into bushes and climb up on the rocks. All the city is forsaken, and no one is dwelling in it. So this is a depopulation through destruction of the army, and the horsemen and bow archers are signifying the Babylonian armor, who will reduce Jerusalem to a ghost town, and the city will be forsaken with no one dwelling in it. That's reference to the depopulation in process, which is as the result of their military activity. And when you are ravaged, what would you do? Though you put on crimson, though you adorn yourself with ornaments of gold, though you enlarge your eyes with paint, you adorn yourself in vain. Your lovers despise you. They seek your life. So the natural man seeks security from forces beyond their power to control through worldly wealth, signified by expensive, fancy clothing, which are useless when the judgment comes. So it's you adorn yourself in vain, and your lovers despise you. They seek your life. That means that those who you regard as your friends are in fact your enemies. For I have heard a voice as of a woman in labor, the distress as of her who brings forth her first child, the voice of the daughter of Zion. She bewails herself. She spreads out her hands, saying, Woe to me, for my being faints because of murderers. So the process of birth is a painful process, and declared and decreed as such to be in Genesis 3:16, and it is comparable to the voice of the daughter of Zion at this event, and her being will faint because of murderers, the murderers in her midst and the murderers outside of them, i.e. the invading Babylonian army. So this isn't the most pleasant or positive topic of discussion, but it is completely necessary. And Jeremiah did not attract mass audiences. He was not an acclaimed or popular preacher, but the lesson we may profitably deduce from the analysis of his ministry is that faithfulness and accuracy to the message you are sent to proclaim is the true measure of a prophet or a preacher, and not the audience they attract. So the market, there's scarcely any market for judgment and doom-oriented prophecies, but they are necessary, and we do well to study them in the interest of preventing further occurrences. because history does repeat itself from lack of attention to it. And that concludes today's lesson. Thank you so much. Tune in next time. Bye-bye.